Yeah, the order is bringing. Shall we bring the chair a little closer? That's all right. That's right.
सहनावतु सहनो भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शांति शांति. Transformation. Before we proceed to speak on what is transformation, we must mention what transformation is not. There have been many concepts in the different traditions in the world hinting at a wholesale change. Even in the Tantras, they speak of golden body. But the precise connotation of transformation, as spelled out by Sri Aurobindo in the Mother, is radically different. To be a saint, to attain sainthood, is not transformation. To cultivate ethical perfection is not transformation. It is not change of habits, change of the pattern of life. That's not transformation. Transformation, to put it in a few words, is a change, a total change in the very texture of the being. Nature is included, but at all levels of one's existence, there is a radical change. And this transformation cannot be effected at one bound. It is a graded process which has several steps. Broadly, there is first the psychic transformation, next spiritual transformation, third is the supramental transformation, of which physical transformation forms a part. To trace this journey, we have to start with the psychic transformation. Very, very few of us are really aware of the psychic. We read about the psychic, but are we really aware, awake to the promptings and the presence of the psychic? And what is psychic after all? Everyone knows that there is a soul within us. At the core of our being, there is the soul, which is a spark of the divine. And this soul is really a projection of the self, the Atman, which is supporting everything, underlying and supporting things from behind. And this self projects a part of it into the life movement, and that is the soul. Now the soul is a developing proposition, unlike the self, which is static, which is immutable, which is immobile. And now this soul has, you may say, two aspects. The frontal aspect, which is involved in the movement of evolution. That's the psychic. And behind, there is a part which holds itself. That is the self. We are concerned with the psychic, which you may say is a concentration of the divine consciousness involved in evolution. The part of the soul that is not involved in evolution is the self. And what is involved? It is the psychic, the Chaitya Purusha, who supports from behind our triple being, the Annamaya Purusha, the physical being, the Pranamaya Purusha, the vital, the life being, and the Manomaya Purusha, the mind. Now all these are supported by the psychic. It is a spark. It is a spark of the bliss aspect of the divine consciousness, of the divine being. It grows from life to life. And when we come to the human level, after how many births, we can't say, we have the psychic element, not the being, but the psychic element throwing its currents in the being. And this psychic, what is called essence, grows by experience and develops into what is called this psychic entity. The essence gathers shape, becomes an entity. And this entity, across many births, becomes a being, psychic being. We have, many of us, we have a mind. But our minds are not developed into mental beings. It takes time. We have to cultivate the mind. So the psychic being is there, linking us with our source, the divine consciousness. And it leads us through all pleasures and sufferings, all the dualities of life. It leads. And you are on the threshold of the inner life, the journey to God, when something throbs in you from the psychic. This throb of the psychic from inside is always full of spontaneous joy. It has no reason. It is a causeless joy, not pleasure, but joy. And it is that, whether we are aware of it or not, that supports our existence. When we are awake to this movement within, it means we are ready to take the pilgrim staff to the Supreme. One precaution. Many confuse the emotional being with the psychic being. The emotional being has many imitative movements which mislead, bring out tears, there is an excitement, there is a joyous vibration. It is the emotional being. But how to distinguish between the emotional being and the psychic? When there is the psychic movement, there is peace, a silent peace. In the case of an emotional movement, there is excitement, there is agitation. You are aware you are experiencing something and you want to communicate it to others. That is the emotional being, whatever it is. Now this psychic, you may call it the Antaratma in Sanskrit, to distinguish it from Atman. Atman, which is behind, above. But Antaratman is what is released into manifestation, is being a spark, being a portion. A spark has developed into a portion of God that is full of knowledge, full of bliss, full of peace. And for those who try to walk the spiritual path, it makes itself felt. Now as joy, now as peace, and now as a spontaneous knowledge without thinking. The sadhak has to cultivate, pay attention to these messages or intimations from the psychic, nurture it and develop it. It is understood that an important part of this discipline of opening to the psychic is to create a psychic climate around oneself. All movements which are contrary to the psychic purity, psychic causeless joy, psychic dedication as a child to God, anything that is contrary to it puts a veil, draws a curtain around the psychic. And we regret that the psychic is withdrawn. Actually, it is our indulgence in unpsychic movements that pushes the psychic back. Moments of selfishness. The psychic is selfless. It always wants to give itself. But every moment of selfishness, every moment of anger, every moment of hatred, these are 100% unpsychic moments which put back the clock. So it may not be easy in outside life to prevent these movements unawares, But for those who practice this yoga, it is a must that they create a climate which is free from unpsychic movements, and what is more important, a positive psychic climate. That is, you cultivate movements of love, movements of goodwill, movements of commitment to others, giving oneself without calculation, and purity. There is an innate purity in the psychic which is unmixed with our animal movements. Indulgence in desire of whatever kind, nurturing of resentments, draw clouds on our being. So this creation or building up of a psychic climate is the first important requirement in this life. In this spiritual life, let alone transformation which is far off. And when we are faced with a problem, we do not know what to do, our reason fails to guide, we are asked to refer it to the inner being, to the soul, to the psychic. And when you just refer it without attaching your own solution to it, what you want the solution to be, but just refer it, and there is an answer. The answer is not in words, it is not verbal. It is a quiet intimation, but with an authentic tone. If at that time you are fortunate to listen to it, you will do the right thing. But if it conflicts with your own preferences, with your own desires, and you just ignore it, the vital mind is always ready to justify your choice, and it will brush off the psychic intimation. If that happens, the psychic again repeats itself. 2 or 3 times you ignore blatantly, the psychic withdraws. But it doesn't withdraw for all time. As Sri Aurobindo says in the synthesis, the divine within is not offended by our revolt. He waits for the hour. So this is a discipline which is to be practiced every day, every moment. So those of us who are serious about this spiritual life have to first denude ourselves of all these rough, rajasic, tamasic elements and keep the channel open. So this is what is called opening to the psychic. The next step is repeatedly draw it to the front, call, pray, exert your will, and practice bringing it to the front and listening to its voice. Voice is subtle voice. This is called bringing the psychic to the front. Make it an operative force in daily life. Naturally, when the psychic is so cultivated, the inner soul, the inner being is so cultivated, encouraged, nurtured, brought forward, you will find that person always radiates love, goodwill, what mother used to call bon volonté, benevolence. Whether you are aware of it or not, when that person passes by you, you feel a certain movement of purity. a happiness, unexplained happiness. That is the psychic bringing to the front. And after long discipline, particularly in an atmosphere like mothers and Sri Aurobindos, or those who have realized the psychic, who have established the psychic, in their atmosphere, it is easier for you to draw it out, to hold it. And when you are identified with the psychic, when the psychic it is that rules your life and not the mind or the vital, that is called the psychic realization. Now, even the psychic realization is not everything. Mother calls for a further step, that is psychicization. Every part of our nature must be geared to the presence and the guidance of the psychic. A very long and difficult process. The mind has its own ideas, the emotional being has its own turns, the vital has its own pulse, and the physical is dull. All these parts have to be tuned to the psychic. And what is important at this stage is sincerity. Where it is inconvenient to you, you shall not ignore it. You have to do what you are told to do. And this continuous attunement of all the parts of the nature to the psychic center is called psychicization. That is the first broad movement which we must be clear in our mind. And one thing that clouds the psychic is falsehood. When we indulge in falsehood, it is worse than cruelty. You are cruel to your animal, you are cruel to your cat or dog. Well, that's not that much unpsychic as falsehood. God is truth, the divine is truth, satyam, and asatyam is the contrary. And that draws a curtain, a heavy dark cloud. And falsehood is something which we have seen Mother reacting in a very unmistakable, strong way. She would forgive any weakness. She would forgive any fault, what we normally call sin and all that. She wouldn't care. But if there was an element of falsehood, it jarred on her. She would not tell you that I have seen your falsehood. She would not. She was too kind and too compassionate for that. But she would note. And her noting was different from the noting of other gurus who would react violently. But she would put a corrective. If she discovered a false element of falsehood in somebody, automatically there would be a corrective vibration. And in our own lives, if we really believe that God is here, that we are devoted to Mother, we have to keep out falsehood. You can't compartmentalize life. You can't say business is business and spiritual life is spiritual life. That can't be done. If we accept the ideal of integral life, that all life is one, and everything, whether it is study, whether it is education, whether it is health, whether it is business, whether it is stock exchange, well, it is all part of it. And unless you conduct these things in the light of that consciousness, you have no business to call yourself a spiritual man or a spiritual aspirant. So these are strong words, but they are necessary. Now, we have covered the first phase, the psychic transformation. When the psychicization is complete, when all nature functions in the mold of the psychic, there is psychic transformation. Next comes spiritual. You will ask, what's the difference between the psychic and the spiritual? The psychic is personal, individual. My psychic pertains to me. His psychic is different. Though the source may be the same, the line of evolution of his psychic is different from mine. So the psychic is personal, and you arrive at it by concentration. You focus your entire consciousness to that center with which you want to relate yourself. Focus. So that is personal. Now spiritual is something universal. It is not individual. You expand yourself, not concentrate, but allow yourself to expand, participate in the universal life consciously. So the characteristic of spiritual is universal, whereas of the psychic it is personal. Now, as the psychic development proceeds, there is an automatic loosening of the ego, which is what holds us to ourselves. The ego dissolves. To quote a line from Savitri, the island ego joined its continent. The doors are open, and effortlessly your thinking, your feeling, your actions, they acquire a universal or a broad character. Where there is a spiritual breath, you can't divide yourself. You can't separate yourself from others. There can't be divisions of groups. There can't be antagonisms between individuals and groups of individuals. You are going counter to the first lesson in spirituality by building groups, claiming a higher status or a different status from others. That is a disease which I have seen in many, many spiritual or so-called spiritual collectivities. I have done a bit of traveling, and to my bitter sadness, where it should not be, there it is maximum. Exclusivism. We are superior. We are separate from this mass. Keep them different from others. This exclusivism, elitism, is contrary to the first lesson in spiritual life. So when we go into the spiritual transformation phase, we have to first shed our narrowness, our exclusivism. We should make a conscious effort to enter into the universal current of life. Our thoughts must no longer be colored with what is good for me and my family or for my group, but what is good for everybody. This requirement of breaking through the walls of our ego, whatever name you may call it, is the first step in universalization. The psychic change prepares in a radical way for this loosening of our joints, and we open, we aspire for the higher consciousness. We are all prisoners of mental consciousness so far, we are mental beings. But when we enter into the spiritual phase, we open, hold ourselves open to what is above the mind, what is above our triple being. And in response to our call, keeping in corresponding to our intensity of aspiration and the action of the grace, there is a descent. The descent can come in the form of peace, in the form of knowledge, in the form of joy, in the form of light. Each one has a different experience. And this ascent of consciousness is automatically accompanied by an enlargement, by a cosmicization of consciousness. Cosmicization of consciousness takes place at the end of a long sustained effort at broadening ourselves. We don't disappear. When the cosmicization takes place, we don't disappear. But we function as a center. We don't merge. That is where Sri Aurobindo differs from the Advaita Vedanta. They say you merge in Brahman. But he says, and Mother says, no. An entity which has come out, has been put out by the divine, there is a reason for it. And you can't just eliminate it by saying, I am going to merge. You can't. She says, you may not maintain your individuality, but that point, individual point, remains. So in this cosmicization, you don't disappear. You remain what you are in the center, but you are broad. You are lost. We have very few examples of universalization of consciousness. There have been people who have had experiences of universalization. They have not realized, mind you. A few, like Walt Whitman, like Emerson, like Rabindranath Tagore, they have had certain moments when they lost their personality consciousness and breathed and radiated the cosmic consciousness. But it was not stabilized. If these people had stabilized and built up that experience into a realization, the history of the world would have been different. Now this is universalization. When you are completely fused in your dynamic aspect with the cosmic consciousness, you will find beautiful description of what takes place when this universalization happens in the third canto of Savitri, where Ashwapati goes beyond his personal limits and he finds how the thoughts of other people enter into his head, how his own thoughts are uttered by somebody else. This is the first time I see that this cosmicization, cosmic phenomenon is so simply described in words like bullets. In the third canto, the Yoga of the King. Now, let us say that this also is completed, the psychic transformation, the spiritual transformation, as a result of which you have become a universal person, Vishwapurusha. It is then, and then alone, that Mother says, you can think of physical transformation. Physical transformation can be thought of only at a particular stage when you have completed the other two transformations. And that starts when the third supramental transformation starts working in you. The light and the power and the knowledge and the dynamism of the truth mind, when it starts descending and working in you, when your mind is changed into a mind of light and it starts working, it is then that you pay attention to the physical transformation. That power, that light has to find its dwelling in this body. And for that, you have to unlearn many things. It's not that you have to wait till that moment. But even now, as we are in our ignorance, we have to practice certain disciplines, like building up a solidity in the body. We can't sit for 10 minutes without moving. Our hands, our fingers, our eyes, eyebrows, they will vibrate. So our ancients designed a system of asanas which build up stability in the body, solidity in the body, and give you what Sri Aurobindo describes as endurance. The body is trained to endure whatever impact takes place, pleasant or unpleasant. Beyond a certain stage, it is very difficult to endure the moment of bliss. In the Veda, there is a famous verse which speaks that when the soma is poured into the vessel, it's all symbolic. Soma is not the wine, but the divine bliss. When it pours into the vessel, means the human body, if the body has not been purified, if the body has not been processed, if the body has not been burnt enough, ataptatanu, which has not been baked enough, then it splits. The bliss splits. We see in our own life, if there is an extra dose of joy, we can't contain it. We have to share it with others. We have to speak to other people. We can't sit in one place. We have to walk. We have to do anything. Now this habituation of the body to a certain solid poise, endurance, that has to be built. And physically speaking, I have not found a better discipline than the discipline of asanas. And for those of us who can do pranayama, Sri Aurobindo, when he first started his yoga, he started with pranayama. And he used to do pranayama 4 to 6 hours a day. How such a busy man could find time so many hours a day has always been a challenge to my understanding. But anyway, he has said it, and he speaks of the results, where he could write 4 or 6 lines a day. He could write 200 to 250 lines in half an hour. The brain cells, the opening to the inspiration in the cells was so spectacular. But when you start pranayama, you have to be careful. Sri Aurobindo, due to political preoccupations, revolutionary activities, he had to drop those practices at one stage, and he fell ill. He said that illness almost carried him off, but he had work to do, a mission to fulfill, and he lived on. But I don't think he practiced pranayama afterwards. But mother also attached great importance to pranayama. She may not call it pranayama, but she said deep breathing. We don't have to go exactly by the ratios 2, 4, 8 and all that. But slowing the breath, holding the breath, releasing the breath as slow as possible, it gives you a wonderful control over your bodily functions and opens you to currents of peace, a certain clarity. You may not care for spiritual life, doesn't matter. Hatha yogins don't bother. But pranayama, after a certain practice of asanas, it gives a balance, opening, and a subtilization. You become conscious where the breath goes, where you are ill, where there is an imbalance, you learn to direct your prana, direct your life force, energy to that area, and it fills up. After all, most of our illnesses are due to imbalance in functioning. So these are preliminary exercises, and what is important is to reorganize the physical life in terms of the psychic and the spiritual guidance. You can certainly control your thought movements, emotional movements, passions and vital movements. But when you come to the sheer physical existence, you come to the organization of cells, and these cells are always there in groups. They have a law of their own. For millenniums, they have been obeying a law of birth, growth, disintegration, and death. Every moment, thousands and thousands of cells are born and die. So this, the supramental light or supramental consciousness works with your cooperation, of course, to re-educate these cells, to transfer the religions from the old law to the new law of birth, growth, and endless progression. It's a very laborious process. But one relieving feature is that we don't go one cell, second cell, third cell. They are groups. And once you impose and cajole a few cells, it spreads in that group. This is the logic of the 100th monkey. Whenever it is, whatever it is, the group collects. There are hundreds and hundreds of groups. And Mother was experimenting in this line, imposing the reign of light, convincing the cells to aspire for transformation, to aspire for surrender to the divine will. A very laborious process which makes meaning if you have already psychicized, if you have already spiritualized your consciousness. And in this, functioning at the physical level, Mother found in her later years the inestimable value of japa. She said that normally japa is taken to be something mechanical and poo-pooed. But she says she found out by practice, by results, that the physical vibration that emanates from each utterance of a japa, it has a strong effect on the cells because they are also physical. So any amount of thought vibration, any amount of love vibration will not make that much difference as a physical sound vibration. That is why she gave importance later on to japa at that phase of life, that phase of sadhana. Japa, and what japa Sri Aurobindo describes in memorable terms, that japa has to come on the crest of a wave of emotion. You should love to do it. It is not that I will do 10,000 times, 1 lakh times. It has no meaning. But each time you repeat, your heart must swell with that, I won't say emotion, with that current of love, current of gratitude, not a demand. When you do that, even 4 times, even 5 times of japa is more powerful than 50 times taking a rosary. All attention goes on counting. Mind goes on everywhere, but Below this thing, detail you will go on counting. I have seen this in various countries also. And naturally, I was too polite to ask them. But does their being accompany the utterance? Sri Aurobindo has given us, he has written down that mantra, Om Anandamayi, Chaitanyamayi, Satyamayi, Parame. Now that is the most powerful mantra for us sadhaks. For the world outside, his Gayatri mantra is more powerful than Vishwamitra's Gayatri in the Rig Veda. But for us in this sadhana, we are all Shakti Upasakas ultimately. And we draw our sustenance, inspiration, and it was found among his papers. And I have yet to see a person who has practiced and not felt the benefit immediately. So, a mantra like that has to be practiced, and you must educate the cells when you come to that stage. It is not correct that I will visualize my cells and tell them you be healthy. It is all auto-suggestion. There is a meaning. There is a value for visualization, value for auto-suggestion. But if you seriously mean transformation of the cells, all these previous steps have to be gone through. But till then, a kind of awareness of the cells. And the best preparation is to impose peace. Peace upon the being. The cells respond to peace more than to anything else. And when the peace is imposed on the cells, they respond. Just as our health also. It is peace. The restlessness in the body, the restlessness in the being, when that is calmed, first quieted, then calmed, then subjected to peace. You know the difference, of course. Quietude is when the mind is silent, not disturbed. But at the first disturbance, the mind goes awry. Calm is a more solid condition when you are not disturbed, but you take note of what is happening. Peace is something more solid. It has a liberative force. Peace liberates. When we attain to that peace, when we open and allow that peace to settle in us, many of the difficulties disappear. These are some of the fundamentals of the yoga of transformation. Maybe it takes time. Whoever has done transformation in one life, this is not to discourage personal effort. There is something else. Human effort, individual effort occupies a very small part in this gigantic project. The supramental light, the supramental force, the truth force, it alone can break the hold of inconscience and release the cells from thraldom to the old laws. But Mother points out, even the supramental consciousness, the supermind that descends, will not be fully, entirely successful till the involved supermind, the sun lying in the darkness, to use a Vedic metaphor, he comes up. And there is a joining with the supermind from below and the supermind from above, and there is a release. Now, all this has to take place. But if it happens in one place, one person, that possibility is open to everybody. That is the law in spiritual life. If, that's what Sri Aurobindo and Mother said, if it happens in us, if we succeed in doing the transformation or whatever in our bodies, everyone will have that possibility. To conclude with one incident, there was one senior sadhak who joined the ashram long before the ashram formed. And he had many capital experiences, and that is why Sri Aurobindo encouraged him to come here. He is played, and after a number of years, he got a doubt whether he will attain the supermind. So he sent word with somebody to Sri Aurobindo. Will I get the supermind? So for anybody else it is a very awkward question. If you say yes, can you really say yes? If you say no, that person will go into depression. But Sri Aurobindo rose to the occasion. He said, tell him that if I get it, he will have it.